White House is defending its position that it's okay to shoot Osama bin Laden, but not okay to waterboard terror suspects. But would we have been able to find bin Laden without the enhanced interrogation tactics? Former CIA and NSA director and retired general Michael Hayden says those tactics were key to tracking down bin Laden's courier, and he joins us now from our bureau in D.C. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Gretchen.
So I think you're one of at least 6 primary sources, people who would know, who've been dealing with this type of thing for the last decade. You say that these enhanced interrogation techniques were key, right?
Oh, they were. They allowed us to gain information, to gain intelligence that would not have been available to us in any other way. I mean, that's just a simple fact. Honest men can differ as to whether or not they're comfortable with some of the techniques that we used, and that's a fair debate. But you don't get to say that the techniques didn't work. You don't get to say that the program wasn't valuable.
So is it a bad idea for this administration to take that helpful tool off the table?
Well, two or three things I'd mention, Brian. Number one, it's not a helpful thing to accuse people who did these kinds of things under clear policy guidance in the past that they were doing something wrong or illegal. That's the first point. The second point, before we even get into discussing how we treat people once they're detained, we ought to start thinking about detaining people. We have not detained anyone outside of the battlefields in Iraq and Afghanistan for several years now. We've made it so politically dangerous and legally difficult to detain terrorists that we go for the other option. We kill them. So let's get them in detention first before we then have a national debate about how we treat them once we have them.
And General, it brings up Umar Patek, who we know did the Bali bombing, and we know that was captured miles from where we eventually found bin Laden. Now, the ISI says, the CIA says we asked for him but didn't get him. The oral report shows that we didn't even ask for him because the Army manual is not going to get anything done. Here's the president on the bigger question. Pakistan. What did they know and when did they know it? Listen.
We think that there had to be some sort of support network for bin Laden inside of Pakistan. But we don't know who or what that support network was. We don't know whether there might have been some people inside of government, people outside of government, and that's something that we have to investigate, and more importantly, the Pakistani government has to investigate.
We understand there's going to be a key resignation today, as early as today, within the Pakistani government, and they said they're doing their own investigation. If I put you back in that CIA spot today, what kind of conversation do you have with the Pakistani government or your ISI contemporary?
Well, I think this is a point, Brian, where the burden of proof is on them. I mean, the president was both correct and cautious in his comments last night. He doesn't want to get too far in front of the facts. It's inconceivable that there was not a network. Now we have to find out who was involved in that network. And again, this is the time for the Pakistanis to prove their good faith with regard to who knew what, when, what did they do, giving us access to the people, the adults that were captured at the compound, giving us access to the material at the compound that we were unable to take away ourselves just because of the volume. These are things that shouldn't be hard. And if the Pakistanis slow roll us on this, unfortunately, we have to draw some very pessimistic lessons.
Yeah, especially if within that treasure trove of information there are names of generals and such or other Pakistani government officials who were aiding and abetting Osama bin Laden.
Gretchen, that's one of the key items. Very often when someone is in someone else's custody, and we're talking about Pakistan, so we'll use that as an example, we fear sometimes that we are denied access because that individual will give us information that the custodial nation doesn't want us to have. And the longer the Pakistanis slow roll us on the individuals, the adults again, captured at the compound, the more they reinforce that kind of suspicion. It's not good for Pakistan to make this take a long time.
Like the 3 wives, the 3 bin Laden wives that we want, and they're not giving it up yet. Maybe they're going to say something. Yeah, I saw that general walk in. I saw the ISI agent walk in, and they signed the guest book. In fact, you have the guest book. So the other thing is, if tomorrow we get news about Zawahiri, we're looking at some of those DVDs and we say we know exactly where he is over in Qaeda, or the Haqqani network. We got a tough decision. Does the president go over again? We've already been threatened. The Pakistanis will deny us, will not allow us to violate their airspace.
Yeah. You're right. You describe it perfectly. It is a tough decision, just like the one last weekend was. In my mind, as difficult as the decision was, as heroic as President Obama had to be to make it, I can't imagine any American president choosing any other course of action. And frankly, if we get number 2 in our sights, I think the same calculus would apply, Brian.
Right. And General, one of the tough parts of this particular decision that the president did make was he could have made it pretty easy just by bombing that place rather than sending in the SEAL teams. And we might have gotten bin Laden, but we wouldn't have had any proof. We wouldn't have had the computers. We wouldn't have had all that stuff.
Yeah, two or three things would have entered into the calculation. Number one, you don't have proof of death in this case. Secondly, you don't get sensitive site exploitation. And Brian, think back. When was the last time did we got a large trove of information by capturing a terrorist and overrunning the site in which he was located? So that's the second thing that you lose. And then finally, at the end of the day, when you now know who all was in that compound, and we appear to have a pretty good handle on the women and children who were there, you were signing their death warrants too.
Yep.
If you put sufficient firepower in there. So there were genuine collateral damage concerns as well.
Yeah, you would killed a dozen children at least.
Right.
Thanks so much, General, for joining us.